up our folder structure. So if you've had me for another class, may already be set up and you may not have to worry about this. If not, we have to set up our folders. So on your hard drive, if you're using a hard drive, or on the P drive, go to the P drive and make a brand new folder with your last name underscore first F 2016.
References folder?
Not yet. Inside that, you'll make another folder called 2540. That's for this class. And inside the 2540 folder, you'll make two folders. One's called finished and one's called work. In past classes, we used to have like a work and source. No one ever used a source. So now we're going to go with work and finished. That way, as you finish something, you can drop it inside the finished folder. So when we get to the demo reel portion, you have a folder that has all your stuff already ready to go to be into a demo reel.
Are we going to have different preferences between two classes?
Not really. So you can still use your same preferences. Okay. There's only one thing that we're going to change is the frame rate. So that's the only thing you'll have to update.
Oh, is it 30?
It's 30, yeah. Okay, so we have the finished folder, we have the work folder. Go back to your P drive. And last semester, that 2016 Maya preference folder was sitting right on the P drive. This semester, they've actually put it into a Maya folder. So inside the Maya folder, there's a 2016.5 folder. Delete that 2016.5 if it's there. Then you can open up Maya.
Would a desktop icon just can we, at least for the programs we use,
They used to have down
is there a
here.
way for those to stay on the computer, being that we're going to be using Maya?
I don't know what they did with this, but it used to be. So our first menu item that pops up is this new features are highlighted thing. You don't need this new features are highlighted thing. If you want to keep it up, that's up to you. I'm going to just say don't show this thing at startup. I'm also going to maximize my Maya. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to set up our preferences that we'll be using inside the software. Under the custom tab, so you see your shelf right here. Under the custom tab, I want to add in specific items that I will use for this class. So does anyone remember the hotkey for adding stuff to your shelf? Kyle? Control Shift. Okay. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift. I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to say Delete by Type and say History. Just click on it once and then let go and then click on your main screen. Okay, so we went to the Custom tab. We held down Control Shift, Edit, Delete by Type, clicked on History, and then clicked off. Are we cool so far?
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. All right. So we're going to hold down Control Shift again. We're going to go to Modify and go to Center Pivot. Okay, so we went to the Custom tab, we added Delete History. We went to the Custom tab and added Center Pivot. Those are two things in animation that will do a lot. We'll also add in what's called Freeze Transform. So I'm going to hold Control Shift. My other people, you can do this too because we didn't add this one. Is Modify Freeze Transform. Okay.
Transformations?
Yeah, sorry. Freeze Transformations. They got fancy in the last couple years. We've used history before, we've used center pivot. If you've never used freeze transformations before, this is what it does. I have a sphere, I've rotated it, I've positioned it a certain way, and what I want to do is basically tell Maya, that's what I want the sphere to look like, and I want you to reset all of these back to zeros. Okay? So if I click on freeze transformation, it keeps the object right there, but resets all those translates, rotates, and scales. So now those are back to default. Okay, so sometimes you want that kind of thing to happen because of where you've positioned, scaled, and rotated an object. There's also, we're not going to add this one, but there's also a reset transformations. That one just literally moves everything back to the default values. It keeps it, or it moves everything back to where it was. That looks like a different one. Match all transforms. Let's see what else we have here. We have center pivot, bake pivot, snap a line. Yeah, a lot of these tools we don't really need to worry about yet. In here. All right, under window, I'm going to hold Control Shift, and I'm going to add the attribute editor, the outliner, the play blast option box. So that'll be a new one too for my other people. So hold Control Shift, add the play blast option box. That's all stuff good. Under relationship editors, anything there? No. General editors, there we go. In my general editors, I want to add the connection editor. So that'll be a new one. General editors, connection editor. And general editors, channel control. And under animation editors, I'm going to add the graph editor and the dope sheet.
What's the quick rig do?
What was that?
What's the quick rig do? It's brand new.
It is. I think it's kind of like the human IK, but it's, I guess, quicker.
Can you say that in the dope sheet?
Graph editor and dope sheet with the last two. Under general editors, we added the connection editor and the component editor. Yep.
Connection editor.
And component editor.
Channel control?
Or channel control, sorry, yep. Connection editor and channel control. Yeah, that was it. And that should be it. Okay, that's good. Okay. I know. It's too many numbers, letters. All right, so that should be good. This should be pretty much everything we need to do in this scene for now, for the shelf anyway. Down here next to the running guy, so there's a little running dude in the bottom right corner. Click on the little running dude. And I've already gone through these in the last class, so I don't need to go through all of them again. But just a couple of highlights just so you can see. Under interface, you can turn on the highlighting. So if you turned it off originally, you can turn it back on. Under the files, under settings, there we go. We need to change our time to NTSC 30 frames per second. As beginner animators, that's what I'm classifying you guys as. It helps to have a couple extra seconds, or a couple extra frames per second. So that way we can fit more animation into 1 second. So under the settings, change that to 30 frames per second. Okay, so instead of having 24 frames in each second, we'll have 30. We'll basically have 6 extra seconds or frames to play with. Under File and Projects, you could turn on your autosave. So if you enable the autosave here, you'll be able to save your file incrementally automatically. So as you're working, all you have to do is just hit save whenever you feel like it, and Maya will save automatically every 10 minutes or whatever you specify. If you don't mind redoing work, then keep that off. If you like redoing work, if you don't mind keeping, if you don't want to do work, then just keep it up, then whatever. You get the idea. Keep it on if you want it.
I don't know if we do.
I don't know. I have. I got one. What else do we got? Selection. So I want to point to something just important in the selection area, just so you can see it. One thing we may not be aware of is what's called selection priority. So if we had a trillion things in our scene and we marqueed over all the items in our scene, Maya wouldn't automatically select everything. It has selection priority, meaning that certain items get selected above other ones. So on the top of that list, our animation breakdown, things we don't need to worry about. But you'll see that there is like a camera way up here. So if I'm in my scene and I marquee a bunch of stuff, I'm going to select a camera before I would select a control vertex or a cluster or an emitter or a field. Okay? Just how Maya works. So when we're selecting things, you'll see sometimes as we select something, we're trying to click on this thing, but it's actually selecting something else like right behind it. All right, so that's where that's going to come in. There's other options here we can play with. Snapping we should be fine with. Sound we should be fine with. Time slider. So go down to your time slider. And on the time slider, we have our playback speed set to play every frame. When you set that to play every frame, Maya will literally play back as fast as it can play. Okay? So if it can play back 700 frames a second, it'll do that. So what that means is that if you make an animation and it looks like it's playing perfectly smooth, then you render it out and it turns out to be really slow, it's because it played back at a different speed. Okay? So what I like to do is tell this to just be in real time. Okay? Real time 30. Now sometimes what we'll do is we'll turn real time off just because it's jumping around, and we'll turn on another option which is maximum playback speed is 30 frames per second. Okay? Are you in the time slider slide? All right, the next one we have is undo. So the default is 50 undos. If you're fine with 50 undos, you can leave it. Most people like to undo things, so I would recommend you hit the undo up to at least, or at most, 200. Okay? If you're someone who's constantly undoing things, 200 undo should be good. You could do infinite. Your memory is going to be evaporated very quickly. If you really want to push it, maybe you can do 500 undos. Every time you select or deselect an item, that's an undo. So imagine if you have a sphere and you're grabbing points, those are all undos.
Sean, just going back for a second. So last class, I had my settings to be 30 frames per second, and I just had to reset it. Is it going to be like that every time? I'm going to have to reset it to 30?
Maybe.
That was the same for me too.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So it might just be the, yeah.
So much for save preferences.
Yeah, for this individual file. That's weird. That might be a new thing that they've added in as a bonus.
Yay.
You just say that for everything.
Yes. Just blame it on Maya. All right, so that should be all the stuff. So we hit save, and now our preferences are all set up. You'll notice in our timeline that our start time is 1.25. When we went from 24 frames a second to 30, it doesn't know how to calculate 1, so it gets this like weird number. So just reset this to 1. Way down here in the bottom left there. Reset both of those numbers to 1, and then make sure you're awound all the way back to 1. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to start the animation process. We're going to animate a bouncing ball. Okay? So we're going to create a polygon sphere. And to make this a little bit easier, let's go into our side view. So I'm going to hold down the space bar, hold down the left mouse right on the word Maya, and just go to my right view. Okay? This way I'm not worried about the ball going in some crazy direction. I'm just focused on a flat view. That's all I need to focus on. Okay? So, let me...
Minus now for the X, Y, and Z.
What? Oh, I don't know. Probably because it's the other side of it. Like, this is the right side. If I went to left, it would be plus X. Where's my left? Yeah, it just says left X. So, just stupid. So, if you hold down Alt and hit B, you can actually toggle between different colors. If you find that you don't like the default, I'm not really liking my default color. I guess that's good enough.
Don't choose that, Sean.
Once you click out of that, you're not going to be able to see that screen.
What?
It's probably going to be hard to see when you go.
Yeah, it's not bad. So what I want to do is this dark line right down the center, that's my ground. Okay, so I want to actually put like a ground, or my ball on the ground. So I'm just going to grab the green arrow and just pull it up until it's sitting on the ground itself. Okay, so just move the ball so it just sits right on top of the ground. Now, one of the things is I like to be pretty accurate in how I do things. So if we look over in the channel box, you see where it says translate Y 0.996? I'm guessing if I set that to 1, the ball would actually be sitting right on the ground. So I'm just going to set that to 1, so the ball's sitting right on the ground. Okay, it was a hair. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see it except for me, and I'll be able to sleep at night knowing that I have that set to 1. All right. Now, in some cases here, I don't want that to be 1, because that's another thing that's going to bother me, that my ball being flat on the ground is 1. That doesn't make sense. 1 should be above the ground. 0 should be right on the ground. Okay? So can you think of anything in our tool set that allows us to reset those things without actually moving the ball? Freeze transform, right? So if we click on freeze transform, it gets frozen. Our ball stays perfectly in line right there, and we're still at 0. Cool. So I'm going to zoom out a smidgy, and I want to set a keyframe. Okay? Whenever we do an animation, we should have some idea of what is going to happen. Where I want those keyframes to be, where I want those poses to be for the ball, I need to set some keyframes. Now, every single time we set keyframes in Maya, we have to tell it we're setting keyframes. So like in After Effects class, you set a keyframe once, and it's automatically set every time you move it. In Maya, we can turn that on, but it's a bad thing in Maya. Okay? So we want to do things one at a time. So looking at this, which direction would I be moving this to get it to bounce straight up? What was that? Down. No. We're not there yet. The drawing is very basic. Okay, it would go up, but which direction? X, Y, or Z? Y, okay? So we're on frame 1. We're going to right click on the word translate Y, and we're going to say key selected. And that's going to annoy me too. They changed how they're doing that.
Does your thing automatically turn to the dragging little arrow
Right here?
as soon as you go over? Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
that.
It's a virtual slider now. That's another new
Can you
thing.
turn that off or no?
Probably. Yeah, it's a 2016
Yes.
extension 5 thing,
A little
or 2
irritating.
thing. Yes, it
I
is.
don't remember mine doing that.
Yeah. It's at home. If you don't have the extension 2, it doesn't. We can get into all the issues with Maya later. All right. So frame 1, we set a keyframe at 0. Notice that when we set a keyframe, if you remember from last semester, when we set keyframes, the whole number would turn red. Okay. In 2016 extension 2, it doesn't. What happens is we get a little red line next to it. So Veronica, your stuff is all red because you have the older version. Okay? So just be aware that's why yours looks different. So now what we're going to do is go to frame, what did I say, 30? Go to frame 30. So I'm just going to drag down here until I get to frame 30. And then I'm going to drag this up. So let's try this. I'm going to click and drag right on that. Oh, that is kind of handy. It's going a little bit quick though. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Okay. It could, yes. All right, so I moved mine up to 8.
There's another thing that you should know about that I just discovered.
All right, so we've moved our ball at frame 30 up to, in my case, I moved it up to 8. You moved it up to whatever you moved it up to. Then we're going to right click on Translate Y again and key selected. Okay, so now we've moved it up to 8 at frame 30, keyed selected, so now we have another red line there. I'm going to move my time up to 60, reset the ball's rotation to 0, and then right click on Translate Y and key selected. Because you did key all and not key selected.
I just pressed S.
That's why, because you didn't follow directions. If you highlight all the ones you don't want, right click, you can delete keyframes, you can break the connections. That works too. Okay, so if we wanted to play this back, what button should we hit to play stuff back? Alt V. Or you can hit the play button down here, but Alt V is the hotkey. So let's hit Alt V. We want to add squash and stretch to our ball. Okay? So with this, we have to go back and kind of look at how this thing would happen. Anytime the ball is stretched out, okay, basically like a football, it's going really, really fast, and that's what's making it stretched out. So at what point in this animation, from just breaking it down to the individual pieces, from 1 to 30, where is the ball going to be going the fastest? Right here. Right at the beginning, the ball is going to be going the fastest. As it goes up, gravity is pulling it down. Okay? So as the ball is moving up, gravity is working against it, and eventually it just kind of flattens out. If it's going faster here, how did it go faster there? Right? How did it accelerate halfway through its movement? It wouldn't. Okay? So it accelerates right at the beginning. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to frame 3, and I'm going to stretch the ball out a little bit. Okay? Now if I just go to frame 3 though, and I start to stretch the ball, what's going to happen though is that it's going to start off stretched. I don't want that to happen. So I'm actually going to go back to frame 1, like this, and I'm going to set a keyframe for my scales. So I'm going to highlight all 3 scales, right click, and key selected. So at frame 1, my ball is at that. It's at 1s. I'm going to go up to frame 3, and I'm going to scale this inward and scale this upward.
You put your. Yeah, what doesn't make sense to me is you do that center pivot, you say you're like beyond the
Right.
line.
Right, I'm peeking out down here, right? I've gone below the ground. So I also have to correct that. I also have to go to my move tool and just move it up so that it looks like it's sitting on the ground still. Okay, like it's being projected upwards. And then we'll set keys on the scales, and I'll set keys on the translate. Okay, so now it looks like we're shooting upwards. Now again, this is by no means a complete thing. So there's more work we're going to do to this. We're going to add some other stuff to it. We're just taking it one step at a time just so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so now I've gone from here to there. Now at what point in this whole animation do you think the ball is going the slowest? The top of the arc, right? Right at 30, because that's when everything kind of levels out. The force going up is gone. Gravity is now taking over, so the ball, when it's at the top, is in limbo. So when it's at the top, it should be back to being perfectly round. So I'm going to reset all my scales to 1, and then set keys for those. Okay, so I went to frame 30, reset my scales to 1, and then set a keyframe.
We have to do that at 30 or?
At 30 it should be. Whenever we do keyframes, it's always easiest to kind of line things up initially, at least right inside the time slider. Later on, we can go back and tweak graphs and dope sheets and all this other stuff to modify it a bit. Okay, so now from 30 to 60, when do you think the ball is going the fastest? Right when it's at the bottom, okay? So I'm going to go 2 frames before 60, like 58, and I'm going to stretch it out again, and squish it in again, and move it up again. And then set keyframes for my translate Y and my scales.
talking about keeping the same volume.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing that in Maya. Do we have to worry about that or no?
Yes. That's why as I scale it up like this, and then scale it in like that.
So we're just eyeballing it then?
Yeah.
We're not, okay.
Yeah. I mean, you'll get an idea too, like, oh, this is really off, as you animate things. All right, so looking at mine, you see we have the stretch up and it pops down. There's other stuff, again, that we're going to keep adding to this, but again, we're kind of doing this incrementally now. When you get to do your own actual animation, we don't do it this way. We don't animate like this and then say, now I'll add this principle, now I'll add this principle, now I'll add this one. You eventually will get to the spot where you're just kind of working through it, and then you look back and say, oh, it could use more squash and stretch, or it could use more of this exaggeration or follow through or whatever. All right, so we're looking at...
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
K actually pauses YouTube videos a lot easier and faster.
What is that?
K.
K
I
does?
learned that, yeah.
I'll have to try that. So now we have what Jason was talking about. What's driving the ball up? Right now the ball literally just does what the example did. It just flies straight up. Bloop, and then falls back down. Okay, so we need to add some more story to this at the beginning of this to give us a little bit more information. Now, there are 10 different ways inside of Maya to do everything. I want to show you the easiest way first, and then we'll get to the more complex ways further on. So in your shelf, you have the DS, which is the dope sheet. The dope sheet will show you all of your keyframes. So looking at the blue line, everything I have selected, let's say I had 30 objects selected, it would show all the keyframes in that blue line, okay? The individual objects are on the green lines, so if I wanted to isolate just one object, I could click on keyframes for just one object, okay? But if I wanted to grab all of these, I could grab all of those and it would grab all the stuff. So it doesn't matter which one you grab, you have to grab either all the green line or all the blue line. But what it allows you to do is grab these and then middle mouse button drag over to the side. Okay, so marquee them with the left mouse, middle drag with the middle mouse. Now I move mine over, like I'm at, I don't know what this is, like 12 and 14. If you go too far this way, that's no problem because you could always add stuff here and then move stuff around.
You said middle mouse drag?
Yes. Okay, you're not doing this yet, okay, but like Jesse was asking, how do we know the timing between keyframes? If I don't like this animation, we're not going to do this yet, we'll do it later. What? Why have you stopped moving? There you go. There we go. So that's kind of slow. I can very quickly just grab these and scoot these in, kind of like After Effects. And I'm changing the timing. So I'm putting them closer together. So now they're going to move quicker. And why does it want to update in there? There you go.
Just scale them in.
Yep. I didn't scale them, I just moved them in.
Oh,
Okay?
you just didn't select, okay. I see.
Right. If I were to scale them, it would actually change the distance between the sides. I didn't want to do that. There we go. Okay, so we gave ourselves a little bit of time before this, so I can close the dope sheet. And then I can go before this animation and change some stuff. So I'm going to go a couple frames before, and I'm going to squash it down and spread it out. And then, of course, move it down so it's still flat.
In this case, wouldn't it be better if our pivot was at the ground?
It would be better if the pivot was at the ground. It would definitely make more sense. However, if later on we decided we wanted the ball to come up and rotate, then we would throw it off, right?
Then you'd have to set what, like a locator or something?
We would have to do, there's a couple different tools we could use. One of them is a squash. So we could actually have a squash controller on the ball, and that would control its squashing. Sometimes it's better just to do this because the ball is centered, and as long as we move it, we're good.
And so knowing what later on we might do if it can alter.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, your animation process, your planning out stage, is really going to dictate how you set up your scene. for most kind of bouncing ball animation things, I just keep it centered right in the middle because that's good enough.
I'm having a hard time though, because now that I did that, can you play yours and let's look at how what's happening?
Hold on, let me go back a couple more frames here, and let me reset this to 1, and reset that to 0, and set my keyframes. 1.
Yes, zoom in and just slowly.
Right, because we want to see right here, right? That's where it's kind of peeking right underneath it.
Before it. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's mine's
Right.
breaking the
Right, and that may happen. And so what we'd have to do is go in between this
keyframe.
eventually and just keyframe those out, okay? Now, as we do any kind of animation, initially we keep it light, okay? The lighter we can keep the animation, the better. That way at every stage we can kind of look at it and do adjustments to it. If I try to go in here in these frames right there and I try to adjust it to make that look perfect, let's say I have, and it's possible, a keyframe every other frame or even every frame, it would just pack that in there. So I have very little ability to tweak stuff smoothly. So I'm keeping it very light. Here, this would never be this smooth, where it just goes bloop, bloop, right? I would have something else going on here to make it look a little bit more realistic. You know, especially here at the end, it just does that.
Now, are we able to like copy keyframes to like make it simpler?
Why aren't you updating? Hold on 1 sec.
Don't forget to save.
Yeah, I'm gonna save. Everyone save. Actually, let's make a project first. We didn't do that. File project window.
We gotta go back to this?
We gotta go back to that.
I mean, we gotta come back to this bouncing ball, or?
Yes, we will.
There it is.
Make a new project. Call it your last name _ bouncing ball playing. Put it inside of your drive on the P drive. Your 2540 work folder. There you go. So I made a project, I hit accept, and then I saved my file.
How do you move the pivot again? I forgot.
D. There we go. Now it's playing.
And V will snap it, or C will snap that?
Well, X will snap it to the grid. C will snap it to the object. V will snap it to the points.
While I'm moving it, I press D and then?
No, you hold. Oops. I would hold D, and then I could move it. And then if I let go and hold V and move it, it'll snap it.
Oh, so it knows that you broke that connection.
Right.
Trying to do something.
Yep.
It's not working.
All right. So now let's go to the next principle and see. So a lot of the time we can change. If we don't like the way this is, we can move the camera, add a camera, animate a camera, whatever. Sometimes it's important to set up the camera ahead of time and then do our animation. Because obviously we could have two characters interacting, we set up a camera, and they either look too squished together or too far apart, and that might look weird. So sometimes you will have a camera set up for that kind of thing. For something like this, we have to be aware of what kind of animation it is. If I'm in my top view, not a very exciting animation. That's all we got, right? So the same thing, if you shoot something like a bouncing ball from more of a top view, you're going to lose it. You'll also notice too that our squishing and stretching, it doesn't happen in both directions, which it really should, but we're only seeing it in the one, so it's fine. Also from perspective, if we were to follow this ball, because some people think it's cool just to kind of do little tricks, right? So, if you ever watch, we watch The Matrix, right? The Matrix is full of these kind of like marquee techniques that they use. Like they have the bullet time thing, they have all the slow motion stuff, they have the fight scenes, jumping in the wall and just holding on, right? They have all those different kinds of things. So sometimes people try to either compensate for a weak animation by throwing that kind of stuff in there, or they're just, think it's cool and just throw things in. So one of the things I've seen people throw into these is I can take my camera here and I'm going to parent it to the ball. So what it means now is that the ball and the camera are going to animate together at the same time. We lose the effect. The camera and the ball are moving together, so it does not look at all like the ball is moving. Okay, there's nothing happening to it. It's a little squashy right there.
M&M.
Yeah.
Like really, the way it was going, it makes it look like an M&M.
There you go. So it's doing something, but I don't know what it's doing because it just doesn't make sense. So some people will attach their camera to their object thinking that it's going to help their scene, when realistically it doesn't. So let's not do that. Okay? So for staging, we pretty much have it staged the way we want. Some other items that would help this thing out is having an actual ground plane in here. We don't need to see it from this side. Having a background. Those are things that are going to help kind of stage it to kind of pull it off of that backdrop. Okay? So we're just going to move on to the next one. Not for me.
No, me either. 'Cause I can't draw, but.
All right, so now we have follow through and overlapping action. So the ball comes down. Oops, let me select it. Comes down and hits. And what's going on here? Yeah, somehow I grabbed a keyframe right at the end of this. There we go. There we go. It hits the ground and then it just stops right there. So what should happen at the end of this is the ball just doesn't go like that. We should have some jiggle on the ball as it comes to rest, especially with how stretchy this has been going up and how stretchy this has been coming down. There definitely should be some jiggle on this. So now what I need to do is go a couple frames after this and start to introduce some more jiggliness into this. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, just go up a couple frames, add a little bit of squishiness, and then go up a couple frames. I'll just reset these back to 1, reset that back to 0. And I think I accidentally set keys on all these other ones. What? Hold on. What do I do here? All right. That's good there. Reset these to 1, reset that to 0, there we go. I accidentally set keys on my other stuff, so I had to go back and delete that. There we go. All right. So on this one, now we have the slow in and slow out. And this is going to be probably the most critical one that we would be doing. It's also the one that confuses people the most. So if you've had After Effects before, one of the things in After Effects is they have a graph, and on the graph you can edit the speed or you can edit the actual values. In Maya we just have one graph and it's just for values. So I'm going to click on my graph editor and you'll see this is what our graph currently looks like. So right now if we look at this, you have to ignore for a second what we're actually, don't try to interpret the graph literally right now, okay? So what you need to do is look at the graph, and anywhere the graph is more horizontal than vertical, it's going slow. Anytime it's more vertical than horizontal, it's going fast, okay? So right here, what do you think it's going? Fast or slow? Fast, okay? What about right here? Between this point and that point? Slow, because that hill up there is pretty slow. There's not a whole lot of movement to it, okay? So if we look at this graph, we have a couple things we can play with. Number one, we always need to make sure the graph is fit. So if we hit F, it fits the graph to our view. Okay? That's an important thing because if I take this, come on, which way is it? Like, oops. Did I change that too? Hold on. There we go. Okay. So something like this looks very much like there's a whole lot of movement happening in the graph. And there's not a whole lot of movement happening in the graph. I hit F, and now we can see what's happening here. Okay? On the left side of this, I can isolate each individual attribute. Okay? So if I'm isolating things, I want to isolate just the translate Y. Yes, ma'am.
Mine has like rotate X, Y, and Z on there too. It just has them automatic.
Well, because you hit S at some point or you keyed all.
Oh.
Okay? We can delete things too. Like if we click on one of these, we can say edit delete, and it would delete the ones we don't need.
All right.
Okay? So what we have here is over here, this is where our ball is on the ground. Okay? The left side of your graph is the time early on. The right side of your graph is later on in the timeline. Okay? So if we look at the bottom, this 0 way down here, it's kind of hard to see, but it's like in line with this. That's 0 frames. This 81 right here is 81 frames. So our time goes across. Up and down is value. So right now we're looking at the Y, the translate Y of this. So if we look, this does kind of come up pretty quick and then kind of plateau and then come back down. But let's take this and make it a little bit more extreme. Okay, so basically what we're going to have it do is move quicker up and really hang and then come back down a lot quicker. All right. So to do that, if we used this point, we could manipulate it. Now in Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, anything with a pen tool, you typically see these points and we can just middle click and drag to stretch it out. In Maya, we have to tell it we want to be able to stretch it out. So you're going to marquee this top point and you're going to go to Curves, Weighted Tangents. Okay, so I just went to Curves, Weighted Tangents. And then under Tangents, Free Tangent Weight. Yes, sir. It's under Curves, Weighted Tangent first, and then Tangents, Free Tangent Weight. Okay? That makes those handlebars able to stretch out. So now if I marquee the point, I marquee the handlebar, I can use my middle mouse button and drag that over. Okay? Now you may have to make your graph editor bigger. If your graph editor is too small, it may be hard to get in there to do that.
What if I can't marquee my handlebar? Oh, just got it.
Oh, come on. All right. So we can keep tweaking this and stretch it out and do whatever. Even like these handlebars here, I can go in there and manipulate these handlebars to really elongate this thing and really stretch out and deform what this is doing. Okay, and what this is going to do is basically when they say slow in, slow out, or ease in, ease out, they don't mean go across every single keyframe and do that. That would look weird. What they mean is look at the actual animation of what's happening and see those spots where you need something to go slower or something to go faster. I gotta find that spot. Somewhere on here it's basically like update all views. It's not updating all my views. So here we go. Whoop. Now one thing that I'm noticing here too is that this ball is now stretching out way too far up here, right? Like the ball only moved like this much and it's stretching out like it's been moving a lot. So now I have to go through my stuff and kind of tweak that. You don't have to do it at this point, but I just want you to see the process for it. Okay, because this is why we're not here yet. These are the curves for my scale. And you can see what my scale is doing is it's let me just show you the 1. My scale Y is going down and then coming up and then going down and then coming up and then going down and then coming up. And then the scale Z is doing the complete opposite. So these two are always going to be an opposite of each other, because as one goes down, the other one comes out. And as one goes in, the other one comes out. Okay? So I would have to tweak these as well by making them weighted, making them free, and then going through and tweaking what these guys are doing. Okay? Basically holding off any kind of scaling that they do until later on. I could also go in here kind of like in the middle, set a keyframe. Come on. And then just kind of pull it so it doesn't move very much until we get to that spot. There we go. So now it comes up. And now again it's looking a little bit more realistic because those things are kind of tied into it. So as we start animating stuff, we have to be kind of aware of what else is happening in the scene and kind of focusing in on these small attributes, translates, scales, rotates, whatever else, and making sure they all seem to match what they need to be doing. Even going in super slow, like that seems like it's actually a good speed that happens. And then here, that looks pretty good there too. And because this happens so quick, maybe I want to stretch these out too. Maybe I want to take these ones, and here's where I can edit these too. I can just say, let's make you like really stretched out here. And let me go to my translate Y. And push you back down to the ground.
How do you zoom into like the point that you selected?
The same way.
Just hit F.
Hit F, or just regular zooming, moving tools that Maya has. Okay, so I just elongated that a little bit more just so it has a little bit more stretch on it. Okay. So for this, we're not going to add any arcs to this, but if our ball was bouncing in a straight path and it was bouncing down there, which eventually we'll do, we would definitely want to make sure we have an arc inside that. Okay. So in this, the ball just bouncing straight up and down, the arc is kind of implied as to how it's moving. We assume that it actually is kind of coming up and bouncing in a arc-like fashion. And things like that, just those 12 videos that we just watched, can take your animation from being super duper boring and make it impressive. Look at the animation we started with, just the ball going boom, 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 and we've added a lot of, let me undo my horrible adjustments that I did to this. There we go. Close that. And it can add a little bit more story, a little bit more interest to something like this. Now, over the course of the next 15 weeks, we're going to continue using these same things. So if you're not comfortable using these yet, that's fine, because you shouldn't be comfortable using them in the first week. But eventually, over the course of the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to keep playing with these things over and over again. Every assignment you do, you should jump back to this, jump back to these principles, and see how many of these things you can put in there. Some of the stuff that I usually get is everyone in here has a different idea, like you said, of what is appealing. So some things I get is, here's camera moves that I don't like. Okay, so here's an animation. We already don't like the camera that follows the object. That's a horrible one. Here's another camera move that I don't like that some people, for some reason, do like. So it's good enough there. So I'm going to set a key here. Go there. There. And there. Okay. So this is seriously some stuff that that has been turned into me is cameras that move like this. Okay, now that's not even 3 seconds. So when that renders out and I'm trying to watch that, I throw up because it's just too much movement. Okay, you have to be aware of the person viewing it. You have to watch this stuff. You have to get other people to watch this stuff. You have to look at it from a non-personal thing, because sometimes we do something and you might spend an hour doing what I just did, and maybe you don't like it so much, but you're like, geez, I really don't want to do an hour's worth of work to fix that. Okay? Very simple things. Here's a very good camera move for something like this. Let me see which side this is stretching on, this side. Here, okay. So this is the kind of camera move that you would need for something like this. I go here, go there. That's all you would need. See, a couple keyframes to keep it simple and keep it appealing. Now the other thing that I get is color choices. So I talked about appeal. Oops.
I'll make it zoom in and out just so you- like a bunch of
Well, I'm
times.
gonna play with your camera movements.
Turn the one in just for that.
Just for that.
You can flip your footage.
No,
You're
I
doing the wrong
just
thing.
don't like.
So here is, again, stuff that people have actually turned in for their colors. They just go in here, and then they just go, that's cool. And then we go to this one. We assign a new material to this. We go to here, and they say, I've never used that before, we'll just add that. And we go to this. Go to that. And that's car paint. I'm going to put water on it. Alright, so what happens is when this gets rendered out, that's what I get. Yeah. So again, looking at the appeal of this and how easy this thing is to read, when they talk about the appeal, the solid drawing is the major one. It's difficult to read anything off of this because your eye is again fighting all of these things that you don't want to be in there. In an animation class, focus on what's important. What's the most important thing in an animation class? The animation, right? It's not, can I throw on a material that I've never used before or a texture I've never used before? It's the animation. It's the simple things. So simply going into this and just picking some very basic colors is 10 times more effective than trying to outdo yourself with just some crazy coloring.
All you need is shadows and it looks fine.
Right, and it really is. All you need is shadows. I'm going to assign a new material to this. And I can still use a Mila on this, and I will assign, in this case I'm going to assign a ramp, but I'm going to show you how I would use a ramp on this. Because right now the ramp is just
Black and white.
black and white. It goes white and then black here. I change this to none. I drag this over, and now that's again something a bit more interesting. Maybe not the black part. Maybe I can turn this to not that color because I already used it.
Make it a Pokemon background.
Yeah. Everyone get your phones out. We'll find a Pokemon.
I've already got it open there with Tauros layer.
Okay, so something like that. Now again, we don't have shadows in here because we don't have a light. So I would of course need a light in my scene. So I would add an area light. And again, I'm mindful of all these things. I'm mindful of the kind of light that I'm choosing. We'll go over all of this stuff too once we actually get to the spot where we're rendering our stuff out. But I just want you to see that it's important to the story of how you set up this stuff. From the people in the modeling class, you'll see I'm using the exact same setup that I used in the other one. There you go. Now look how much more effective this is compared to crazy color, reflective sphere in the middle, right? This is more effective. This kind of animation, or this kind of lighting and shading pulls off the information that we need. We can see the animation more clearly. And it looks much more complete, much more finished, okay? With just literally a flat color, a ramp that is basically cutting it in half, and this. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say the first one made me think like, were you high or something?
Probably. Only on Wednesdays. All right, today's Wednesday. Now, also, me using the ramp on here, if I rotated the ball, I can see the rotation, right? So if I go here, I can see the ball rotating around and spinning. So if the ball was rolling into the scene, I can see that the ball is rolling into the scene because it has some sort of texture to it. Some people will keep the ball as a flat color, animate the ball rolling, and you can't see it. So you lose that information, okay? So if you're going to do something like animating a ball rolling, we want to make sure we can see that the ball is rolling. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes we can go a bit more complex to it. And I'll even add in, let's say, a white stripe right there. There you go. So now I've added a white stripe in the middle instead of having that. And again, it's more interesting having flat colors like this than trying to outdo yourself or trying to compensate for it. When you turn in a demo reel for animation, most of the time your textures are off. Okay, you don't have any texture showing, you don't have any lighting in there. They're literally just looking at like a wireframe animation. There's a 10:30 already.
We didn't do anything.
We did.
We learned.
We went through the 12 principles of animation, had some fun.
Yeah, watching YouTube videos.
Yep, always watching them. We need to back up our stuff. So make sure that you take your Maya preferences, which are in the Maya folder in the 2016, and you cut those, and you put those inside of your 2540 folder. That way you'll have your preferences next time you come in, you'll have them all ready to go. So you go to the P drive into Maya and cut the 2016 folder. Go into your folder and paste them. Oops. And then once you're done, I would back up this entire fall folder. That way when you come in next time, you have your preferences and you have anything else you're going to need for the class. Okay?